My name is Henna Juusola, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Tampere University. And I also would like to thank you, colleagues in Japan, for the very interesting and exciting presentation. And I also want to thank Ossi and others for organizing these seminars. It is indeed an honor to be here. So, Kimmo, I wonder if you are here present as well, since we have prepared this presentation together.
Yes, so I'm here.
Would you like to introduce yourself in this point?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. I will join Henna in her thanks to organizers, to Ossi, to organizing this absolutely wonderful seminar and for the very, very enlightening presentation so far. But thank you so much. And well, yeah, right. I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Tampere University as well. And on my daily job, when I'm not doing research, I'm also a teacher trainer at the University of Applied Sciences. So that's my other day job, if you like.
I can perhaps also add that this presentation on my side is based on the doctoral dissertation relating to the quality of Finnish education export. And also my recent research related to the legitimation of the Finnish education export. But we have prepared this presentation together with Kimmo. But perhaps I think that we can start. We are planning to discuss about the next 40 minutes about a few words about the Finnish context, terminology, actors, policies. We will also go through some ideas about the principles and tensions based on our own research. And also, finally, we move on to the Finnishness of Finnish education export. But before that, few words about the context. Would you like to continue here, Kimmo?
Cheers, Henna. Yes, exactly. So we thought we'd simply present you very briefly the general idea of the Finnish education system. As Henna already mentioned, I mean, we'll be mainly focusing here on the education export in the context of higher education. My part will also touch upon other issues, especially the question of domestic markets. The Finnish education system, as you can see, is presented here on the left, predominantly, almost exclusively, a publicly organized and funded education system. And from the university part, a thing that we might want to notice is the structure where we have the so-called research universities, and then the more practically or applied oriented universities of applied sciences. Both offer bachelor and master's degrees, but with a different focus. And then the research universities obviously offer the doctoral education as well. Currently, a little over half of our university students are female, and as you can see, the number of foreign students is not particularly high, according to the latest number, 7.2%. Henna, would you want to point out any other facts about our system?
Perhaps it's also worth to mention that the amendment to the University and University Applied Sciences Act in 2017 enabled higher education institutions to gather tuition fees, and the minimum amount is also based on the legislation is 1,500 euro per academic year, though typically the amount of the tuition fees is more than that. But we can perhaps continue to explore what is education export. What does it actually mean in the Finnish context? What do you think, Kimmo?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we've put here together a huge number of terms and concepts, and this is, of course, one of the features of education export. There is no one defined term for what we are basically talking about. In research literature, you will find a lot of different types of terms, and I believe, was it Henna Knight who has counted about, 40? I remember.
Yes, around 40. Jane Knight has stressed that this this kind of or perhaps identified that also in the international education framework or context, there is over around 40 terms describing the education or similar kind of activities, and saying that is has a long history and long experiences on studying internationalization of higher education. She has stated that this is a terminological chaos, which makes it a little bit difficult to compare different kind of activities.
Exactly. And our two approaches, I mean, Henna, you might want to say something about your like general approach, the internationalization, academic capitalism. I might mention that the way I look at and currently doing my PhD is more on the public-private partnership side of education export and the developments in that side and the questions related to the public-private partnerships in the Finnish education export scene. But what about your general approaches, Henna?
Well, in my research, I have approached the education export as a part of the international activities where something people, or such as the students or teachers or academics or educational services or knowledge moves across the national border for profit purposes, though. And I have also recognized that this kind of trend is part of the academic capitalism, meaning that the commercialization is becoming one element of the other kind of activities in higher education sector as well. And this may mean also the new kind of arrangement between the higher education institutions and the market and the nation state. But in perhaps it also worth to mention that education export, koulutusvienti in Finnish, it is rather widely understood in Finnish context. So basically, what is the Finnish education export product may mean very differently for the different kind of providers. But in the higher education sector, for example, the teacher education and different kind of trainings provided to the international customers or the international students in Finland is considered as a part of the education export. Would you like to Kimmo, add something?
No, sure. I thought let's take a look at the actors.
Yes, let's move on. Well, the actors, the network of the actors in the frame of the higher education sector is also rather diverse in Finland. There's only a few examples, but for example, the national authorities are important actors in terms of setting and implementing the political priorities. Basically, the Finnish government set the political priorities for the education and education export, whereas the Ministry of Education and Culture participate in this government work by planning and implementing the political priorities. But the Ministry of Education coordinates also the Team Finland Knowledge Network that consists of higher education and science policy specialists working currently in 8 different countries. And the aim of this network is to promote internationalization of Finnish higher education abroad. And also another national actor, rather relevant in context of education export, is Education Finland, that operates under the Finnish National Agency for Education and is funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture. So the aim of this Education Finland is to provide the discussion forum and networking forum for Finnish education export actors and providers, and also to promote the education export activities abroad. We have also added here the educational institutions, because now we are focusing on the higher education sector. So, of course, obviously the universities and universities of applied sciences and the faculties and units are important actors and provide education export providers. Would you like to say something about the consortiums, Kimmo?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Well, we've had two types of consortiums here. The first one here, the consortiums owned by educational institutions, could as well be called companies. These are share-based companies. EduExcellence, for instance, owned by 3 universities of applied sciences, and EduCluster, Finland, may be the oldest example of the companies owned partly by universities. Because of the nature of the education export, as Henna will be mentioning, the project kind of a based nature of education export, there are a lot of ad hoc consortia forming as a project emerges, or if they find a business opportunity. And here we have an interesting link, for instance, of the Universities of Applied Sciences, Schools of Professional Teacher Education, and Finnish Church Aid. Of course, a theme that we could also talk about, but we won't be talking about it here now. And another example of the Omnia Education Partners, which is also an organization which is owned by a public educational institution, but it does only education export business. And a lot of projects find these kind of consortia. There were also, I think, interesting similarities to the presentations that the colleagues mentioned about Japan, and as well as differences. But I think we'll leave those things, written them down for at the question and discussion part. So Henna, over to you. Now we have the very, very interesting case example that you have presented also in your doctoral dissertation.
Yes, thank you. This example indeed is based on my doctoral dissertation, and it's example of the different actors in education export implementation. Well, as you can see in this case, implemented program was a master level degree program in teacher education that was implemented in Indonesia between the years 2016 and 2017 in a collaboration between the Indonesian Foundation and the Faculty of Education of one university in Finland. And the Indonesian Foundation owns 3 comprehensive schools in Aceh region, and the students of this exported program were teachers from the local schools owned by the foundation, and those teacher students did hold a bachelor degree from the Indonesian university, mainly from the Indonesian university. And basically, all the teachers in this program were coming from the provider side. So basically, the Finnish teachers were traveling to Indonesia once per month and provided education there. And the facilities were provided by the local school in Aceh region, where students and teachers also stayed. And teachers stayed 1 week in Aceh approximately per month. And during that week, all the lectures took place. And between the intensive weeks, students had independent assignments. But students did have also a 6-week visit to Finland during the spring term 2017. So as this sort of figure at least try to illustrate, the key players in this implementation represent on the one hand the Indonesian partner, the foundation, and then on the other hand the Finnish university, and especially the faculty of the Finnish university host the teaching staff were coming from the nearly from the only one faculty, and the teaching staff were the providing the education export in practice. But however, before even the implementation took place, before the actual education export was implemented, the negotiation took place to education export consortium, which was owned by 4 universities at that time. So the consortium negotiated an agreement with the foundation. But on the other hand, even before the negotiation, the Ministry of Education from Finland visited Indonesia in 2015 and signed an agreement on collaboration in the field of education. So it might be that also this kind of activities and this kind of actors has indirectly or directly impacted to the fact that teacher education was exported in Indonesia. And also it might be also worth to mention that our former president Martti Ahtisaari is well known in Aceh region because of his role in a peace negotiation in a conflict between the Indonesian government and the local movement in past. But when the actual implementation then started, students that participated in the education export implementation became a key player. So, and also the other regional and local stakeholders, such as representatives from the local universities and local religious communities, it was important that they met and the different actors had possibility to get to know each other and sort of strengthen the confidence towards this exported education. So this example, of course, this is a case-specific example, but I believe it describes the multi-levelness sort of actors network that at least potentially can exist in education export activities.
The development of the national policy documents concerning education export, as we can see, the education export is not a very recent thing in Finland. So there's actually a history that goes back, because tuition fee-based education is also considered part of education export, because that strand goes back actually quite far, so all the way to about 2005. The first national strategy for education export specifically came out at 2010. And at the same time, it is very important to notice that the Finnish country branding report placed education at a very prominent place in the Finnish country brand. And I think both me and Henna, we think that aspect is still seems to be very important in the Finnish education export scene. What else, Henna, did you have about this one?
Well, perhaps we can also mention that after the national strategy for education export, there has been the other policy papers published relating to education export, and the most recent one, I believe, is the roadmap for education export. Altogether, there are now 2 roadmaps for education export. First was launched in 2016, and the newest one now in 2020. And in the newest roadmap, the change in the geopolitical situation, partly at least based on the global pandemic, but also the importance of the international networking and the opportunities offered by the educational technology, and also potential for expanding education export activities, including the early childhood education sector, is stressed in this newest roadmap. Recently also the national starting points for education export were combined with the development policy goals. For example, in a national development cooperation policy recommendation, the Finnish export is seen as one solution to the global learning crisis. Would you like to, Kimmo, mention something else relating to policy documents, or perhaps the legislation?
Maybe very, very briefly, simply, of course, that in Finland the education export is covers every sector of education. And one document, for instance, we haven't mentioned here because it does not relate to higher education, is the education export strategy document on exclusively vocational education, which is also has been also placed quite in prominent position lately, and especially in the context that Henna mentioned about the so-called global learning crisis, and especially directed at those countries where Finland is active in the area of development aid. Another interesting parallel to the Japanese case. But I think we can move to the principles and tensions part of our presentation, because we have some interesting stuff there from Henna's research on quality, which is something that we're going to start this part with.
Thank you. Well, first, we want to share you with some quote or text from the first education export strategy. And as you can perhaps see or perhaps read, the quality and targeted quality assurance are seen as a starting point for education export, and important for the education export providers as well to become successful in education market. But what is actually quality, and what can quality mean in education export context? Well, in my dissertation, the multiple dimensions of quality concept was evident. For example, the following the Harvard's and Queen's understanding of the quality concept, higher education institutions may seek the good position in the international rankings, indicating the quality as exceptional. But at the same time, the university can stress the feedback received from fee-paying students and consider quality as value for money, by taking into account different kind of social, cultural, and political factors which are important when implementing the education export activities abroad and approaching quality then as a fitness for purposes. So in this context of education export, especially within the higher education, the quality can include more uncertainties compared to situation where the higher education institutions are primarily operating in one nation context. And this uncertainty is often related to diverse stakeholder groups, and also the different needs of these stakeholder groups, and also the different political and sociocultural environment, and perhaps also the fact that the private provider institution may need to take into account legislation at home and abroad. But also the comparing programs and perhaps, the learning outcomes can be challenged for providing institution, mainly because of the need to ensure the comparable academic results abroad and at home. But the quality issues and quality assurances are also linked to types of educational activities, as I mentioned and Kimmo mentioned beforehand already. The project-based implementation that are done with the international partners may require external accreditation as well, because of this lack of the national criteria to education export activities. So, but in spite of that, in Finland we do not have the strict criteria to education export activities. The international recommendation is of course valid for the Finnish education export providers as well. So, for example, the OECD and UNESCO published it already in 2005, so nearly 20 years ago, the quality recommendations for education export activities. And also the other, for example, the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education has launched their own toolkit. So these issues has been in a political interest, but also interest of the international organizations, and it has but we have the national characteristic to approach the quality assurances, and this impact as well how things are done. And this I will just briefly describe this triangle. Basically, this is based on my PhD research, where I explored quality from 3 different perspectives, combining the national debate on education export and the institutional approach to quality assurance, and perspectives from students and staff members in one education export implementation in Indonesia, which I already briefly presented. And basically, this picture illustrates the main results from research indicating that, well, the political approach to quality and a pragmatic approach to quality as it is done, but also the role of the teachers in novice implementations, they all somehow interact, meaning that those issues that are important in a practical level can become political interest and vice versa, but not necessarily. So, and I will move on, and just briefly give you some examples about the students' perception on quality and the teachers' understanding or approach to quality issues. This case is an example which is also included in my doctoral dissertation, illustrates the different kind of notions of quality, and this is based on the convention theoretical approach, indicating sort of the logic or sociocultural frames, logic and principles behind of the quality characteristics. And one issue that were stressed in both groups was actually the Finnish approach to teacher education. So that was seen important for the teachers and for the students. But this important quality, but this Finnishness was understood a bit differently. For example, the teachers, the Finnishness were mainly concentrate on the pedagogical approach and an academic approach, while as for the students, the Finnish education was seeing as a promise of something better. It also seemed that the reputation of Finland as an educational country and its success in PISA raised the students' curiosity towards the Finnish education and also trust in this program. But that was during the implementation, the teachers need to ensure this trust and gain this trust again. But now I will move on. Basically, the main points here are that the based on the research, the quality is not stable. It is also stressed in the previous research and is influenced by the activity. For example, those characteristics that describe the quality in marketing, such as stressing the excellencies of Finnish education, may not work in an implementation level. And also, most likely, different actors have different opinion about the quality. And based on my doctoral dissertation, also the quality and logics behind of the quality factors varies in time. So while the national strategy of education export and country plan report may stress the PISA results and dominance of the market logic, it might not be relevant in education export activities nowadays or during the implementation process. But I will move on now, so that also Kimmo has time to say actually something about the potential tensions. So please, floor is now yours.
Cheers. Yes, thank you. Very, very briefly about, I think there are some points here that well reflect also the presentation of Professor Takayama and the points that he made there. In my study, I'm looking at the education export and education's relation to the social system and the society in Finland. The education export program, if we look at the government official documents, emphasizes a lot the achievements of Finnish education in Finnish society. And of course, research has shown how deeply intertwined education is in society, in Finland's case, in the Finnish welfare society. And the Finnishness, therefore, seems to reside somewhere there. It's very difficult to say what it is. And at the same time, it is an interesting problem because the Finnishness also seems to be at the core of the if we like, business idea of the education export. So something that we find very, very difficult to extract is at the same time something that we should be selling and packaging, even making into a product. And so very difficult tension here. Of course, business. It is also a system. Business is not something that is not part of a social system. Obviously, it is, and I think in the Finnish case, we have the situation, and this is what the education export documentation and also previous research seems to indicate, is that we are moving towards something that we could call a business ecosystem. To facilitate education export. However, in this context, when I talk about ethos and the sustainability, the sustainability mainly is about the sustainability and the meaningfulness of education export as an intervention. I think something that Professor Takayama also touched upon. Admittedly, it is true that the Finnish government education export program and those documents, they emphasize the idea of larger systemic projects that have long-term effects. But still, the question is, can that be demonstrated along the line? We already have projects that have been going on for a long time, but whether the projects are able to have the effects they're supposed to have. Let's take the next slide, please. And you can put up all the quotations there straight away in the interest of time. I've put here as a starting point the Minister of Education's Education and Research Plan 2003-2008, where a very clear comment is made about Finland has not entered nor intends to enter into commitments under GATS concerning free access to markets or national treatment in education and training. Now, this is, of course, a separate thing from education export. Here, we're simply saying that, well, Finnish education will remain Finnish. That's it. It's not as such about education export. Yet, the fact that even at the moment, in the higher education sector, we have a lot of businesses, 5 left, cheers. We have a lot of businesses who are part of higher education, Finnish higher education, not providing education as such, but working around the various services. And although it is just one example, what we can see also is that we're moving towards a closer cooperation between public and private sides of education, not necessarily for the provision of the core product, if you like, but definitely everything around education. But even further than that, if we look at the quote from 2016 strategy, service development work of small startups should be more candidly connected under the umbrella of English taught degree programs in higher education. Now, this suggests, in my interpretation, a fairly strong intervention and a connection to the core work of the university, the provision of their own education. And then there are also some parts in the development of the education export strategy which have not materialized, like the 2017 plan of establishing a company. This has never come about. And I believe, Henna, there's one more quote to come. There we go. And here we go even further into the idea of establishing a domestic market for the aid of education export. And this is, of course, rather far-going idea. What should be done to enable education export. So what should be done in the domestic education to enable the export? And this is what I find quite an interesting development in the Finnish education export, in the government plans of Finnish education export. And the next slide simply refers to Pia Seppänen study, who has been looking at this side of the education export in the primary education context. But now let's move on and take the Finnishness of Finnish education export in about 2 minutes.
Yes, that's an easy task. Okay, I think I will now skip some rather important point, but maybe we can move on a bit faster. And well, I can stop here and say that this Finnishness, this text is from the research relating the legitimation of Finnishness of Finnish legitimation of Finnish education export, and this narrative is based on the qualitative content analysis that was done with the Finnish education export providers. So this is not representing any research participants' personal opinion, or this is a combination of all interviews. And what I want to stress here is that based on the research, the Finnishness is in a way ideal. The Finnishness is understood in terms of pedagogical approach, in terms of the safety society, in terms of the promise of better life, but it is constantly negotiated. So because of each Finnish education export cases is particular, so it needs to be negotiated again and again, and there is no one solution or sort of conclusion what is Finnishness in Finnish education export. I will, yes. Would you like to stress some points here?
Yeah, these are simply to illustrate pretty much what Henna said, once again through quotations from the education export related documents. But for the interest of time, let's not go deeper into that, but let's move to our concluding slide.
Yes, the last one. Well, in general, the ethical issues is not much stressed in the national strategies or public discussion relating to education export in Finland in general. But perhaps the one issue that could be discussed more is, for example, the legal status of students participating in education export activities abroad. And also, it also seems that, for example, the equity or accessibility are only now becoming an issue in Finnish higher education policy. So it is unsure how this is considered in Finnish education export implementations, or how this will be considered in the future. And also often the ideology of the Finnish education is considered to represent democratic values and without having any colonialist national history, at least not as such as in UK or some other European countries. But perhaps because of this, it can be also asked whether the potential imbalance in North-South power relations is underestimated in Finnish education export activities.
And what we can also say is, of course, that interestingly, if we look at the Finnish education export and we look at how it does evaluate the Finnish education as a system, as part of the society, it at the same time recognizes parts of the society, a part of the education system as a restriction. This conflict is not at all dealt with in the official education export document. So on the one side, there is a lot of branding type of talk about how huge and great achievements the education in Finland has had. However, for instance, laws concerning education are seen as a hindrance. They're not seen as a safeguard or as a part of the greatness of the system, if you like. They're seen as a hindrance. And once again, an interesting tension.
And the last point is that what will become in the future? What is the future of education export, and what kind of futures will be produced through the Finnish education export? So that remains to be seen, I guess. Would you like to add something, Kimmo?
I believe in the interest of time and to respect the honourable chair, Oshie, I do believe we can conclude at this point and open the floor hopefully for great discussion. I think we have really interesting points here that we can compare and discuss. Thank you so much.
Thank you.